the three Abrahamic religions, has many different names or terms. For example, the Hebrew word Sheol, which is used 65 times in the Old Testament, while the Greek word Hades is found 26 times in the Apocrypha and 10 times in the New Testament. Both Sheol and Hades refer to a general dwelling place of souls after death. You can find this in the book of Genesis, for example, or the Acts of the Apostles. A sphere found in the underworld. This is in Numbers and in the book of Matthew. This is also called the pit in Isaiah, and the bottomless place or abyss, which is found in both Luke and Romans. The lower part of the world is another term. This is found in Ephesians and the Psalms. Now, this all becomes the inferiores partes, or inferno in Latin, a bottomless pit that becomes associated with chaos and death, a realm or prison of rebellious spirits. Now, in post-exilic Judaism, it becomes a place reserved for the punishment of sinners. You find this in the first book of Enoch. In the New Testament, the Synoptic Gospels and the book of James, as well as Matthew, this is mentioned 12 times. The name of place or pain becomes Gehenna, the place where, according to Christ, sinners are punished after death. Gehenna was originally the Hebrew name of a valley just outside of Jerusalem, a hill in the southwest. The place of punishment, especially by fire, that was anticipated by Isaiah, the large topeth, or burning place, that was lit up by the Lord to punish the Assyrians and their king. The topeth is also mentioned in Jeremiah, the book of Jeremiah, and 2 Kings, the place where pagan worshippers of Baal burned their sons and daughters as offerings in human sacrifice. Now, the New Testament examples of Hades, 3 in which punishment is the point, corresponds to Gehenna in both Luke and Matthew. In other New Testament passages, the Greek word Hades occurs in a, neutral sense, a space where all the dead souls are kept. You can find this in the book of Matthew, Acts of the Apostles, 1 Corinthians, and of course the book of Revelation. To the Greeks and Romans, Hades was both the name of the underworld and the king who ruled it. The Greco-Roman underworld was a cold, moldering, dingy place surrounded in darkness, or shrouded in darkness, without some kind of burial or cremation, the dead could not pass through the gates of Hades. Now, this king of the underworld, Hades, also known as the Zeus or Jove of the departed, was a dark and sinister god that was to be feared and kept at a distance. Now, all these different references concerning the location of what we now call hell are colored by the usual cosmology of antiquity, a threefold universe: heaven above, earth in the middle, and of course the underworld. The concept of hell is concerned with the destiny of the dead and the general conviction that human existence continues in some way with the separation of the soul from the body and separation from life on earth. And the burial of the dead in the ground localizes the realm of the dead in the underworld, with the souls of the wicked dwelling in the deepest section, with the distance of the deceased from the light or nearness of God. Now, several different perspectives arise or emerge in the Bible. Sheol, the dwelling place of all the dead, independent of their moral character while alive. A type of universalism. We all go to Sheol. Now, with the underworld's thirst for souls unquenchable, its hunger is never sated. and it keeps asking for more. You find this in the book of Proverbs. In post-exilic Judaism and the New Testament, the general place of the dead becomes provisional, with the belief in the coming resurrection of the dead. You find this in the book of Daniel, Acts of the Apostles, the book of Romans, and of course the book of Revelations. Ethical and moral viewpoints become involved within the concept of the underworld. Sheol becomes a place of punishment. For example, Korah and his companions are swallowed up by the earth, swallowed up by the underworld, and his supporters are burned in fire. This is in the book of Numbers. In the book of Psalms and in the book of Isaiah, psalmists and false prophets threaten the godless with destruction in hell. And in the book of Proverbs, the teachers of wisdom warn young men to avoid hell, or you will have an untimely death on earth, and then eternal punishment. Different sections for the righteous and sinful in hell or the underworld emerge. You find this in the first book of Enoch, where blasphemers, those who insult God, are cursed and punished inside a flaming gorge. In the New Testament, the story of Lazarus illustrates different places reserved for the righteous and different places for the sinners within the realm of the dead. Luke calls this the bosom of Abraham. In 2 Peter, the Greek term Tartaros is also used. Tartaros was the deepest region of the underworld in Greco-Roman mythology. This is actually lower than Hades and is a place reserved for divine punishment. Now, the Gospel of Matthew is especially concerned with the negative aspects of hell. But John, in his Gospel, and Paul, in his letters, do not develop this, concern any further. But hell is seen as a power that endeavors to attack life on earth. For example, the cords of Sheol entangle me. This is in 2 Samuel as well as in the book of Psalms. And the gates of hell in the Dead Sea Scrolls, represent the aggressiveness towards the world. In Matthew, the gates of hell will not be able to subdue the church. And Gehenna, hell, inspires false teachers and prophets, while in the book of James, hell inflames and orchestrates the tongues of evil men, while in the book of Revelation, the powers of destruction ascend from hell to rage on earth. God, however, is the one who controls hell, and his own fire is able to destroy it. This is found in the book of Deuteronomy. And hell is never hidden from the eyes of the Lord. You can find this in the book of Psalms as well as the book of Job. And God is able to rescue a pious soul from death and hell. This is found in the book of Psalms. The conviction of God's omnipotence leads to a belief in the resurrection of the dead, and God will swallow up death itself. This is in the book of Isaiah as well as in 1 Corinthians. I will open your graves, says the book of Ezekiel, and the dead will live again, and their corpses shall rise. This is in the book of Isaiah. Many shall awake, some in everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. This is in the book of Daniel. In the New Testament, hell and death are defeated by the Lord of life, Jesus Christ. You find this in the Acts of the Apostles. Christ being raised from the dead by God, and according to Matthew, some of the righteous have risen together with him. Paul avoids expressions of hell and reserves some place for the dead until their resurrection. A peaceful sleep for some in 1 Thessalonians, and a punishment by fire in 1 Corinthians. Christ's final victory over death and hell is described in far more detail in John's book of Revelation, where the final conflict between good and evil leads to the complete disappearance of hell and death. Although the destructive powers of hell increase their attacks upon humanity before the approaching end of the world, which of course leads to a new glorious beginning. This apocalyptic vision, which showcases the influence of Persian parallelism or dualism upon the Judeo-Christians. This turns the Valley of the Dead Souls, hole or pit, into a place of punishment. You find this in the first book of Enoch, where the abyss of hell, the pit, also known as the abyss, hole, or pit of hell, is depicted as a cavity into which the faithful Jews gather on top of a holy mountain and look down to see the righteous judgment of eternal punishment on all the godless and cursed souls or people. The Old Testament only speaks of temporal reward and punishment in the case of virtue and vice, as an untimely death for the wicked, the cutting off or excommunication from God's graces, or the barrenness of the land, as well as the punishment of captivity and slavery. But the Talmud and later rabbinical writings clearly shows a belief in hell and showcases the influences of the Greeks and Persians, with the 7 degrees or habitations of hell, with 7 different names. This is, of course, a parallel to the 7 heavens of Jewish mysticism. Each circle of hell has a great diversity of suffering, with the first circle of